And we are live. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to A Bookish Moment. I'm Sarah Burr.
And I am J.C. Kenney. And first off, I want to say a big thank you to all of our veterans out there as we observe Veterans Day. We thank you for your service and we appreciate all that you have done for us. We have a veteran of fabulous storytelling with us today. So, Sarah, I think it's time to get bookish.
Yes, I very much agree, JC. And I just want to echo those sentiments regarding our wonderful service members who have protected our country and served to defend our Constitution. We very much greatly appreciate you. And we wish you a very peaceful day. So without further ado,
Yes.
I want to say hello to our folks that are chiming in into the chat as we speak. We've got Mizan saying hi, everyone, and DHB saying good afternoon. You guys, we have a treat for you today. Boy, are you going to be super hungry after this episode wraps. We are joined by the delectable, wonderful Mindy Quigley, and we are so excited to have her here to talk about her latest cozy mystery, At Death's Door, which I don't know about you, but this series has some of the best puns out there. In the title, I have a whole list to go through a little bit later on in the show, but Mindy, chef's kiss, love these titles, love your books. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I am delighted to join you for a little bit of bookishness.
Yes. Hey, we all need bookishness, right?
Yes, we've got it's a nice slice of life that we get to
Oh, I see
connect with
what you
each
did
other.
there.
Oh, see what I
Oh my God,
did?
that was so cheesy, Sarah.
Oh my gosh, we are going
Okay,
to
yeah.
have
Yeah.
way too much fun. As folks are getting settled into their seats, we have Sarah Fritchman chiming in with a hello, everyone. We have our friend, the fashionable bookworm, saying, hi, Mindy. I started reading At Death's Door today. And Mizan says, I love that title.
Yes.
So before we dive into chatting about your latest mystery, Mindy, any chance that you can kind of give us a little bit of a play-by-play about, what in your life led you to writing cozy mysteries? What were you doing before? What kind of brought you into this world?
So I've had a strange career that I feel like if I just described all of the things that I've done for work, it would sound like an AI hallucination. Like there's just a bizarre list of things, but mostly I've worked in academic administration and project management. That's the backbone of the career. But within that sort of broader category, I've done some really cool things. Like I was the personal assistant to the scientist who cloned Dolly the sheep and got to travel to China with him several times for a project that we were
Wow.
on with some universities there. And then I was the project manager of a research clinic that was founded by J.K. Rowling in her mother's memory, the Anne Rowling Research Clinic. So it researches neurodegenerative diseases. And then my most recent job was setting up the veterinary clinical trials office at the vet school at Virginia Tech.
Oh,
So I've
wow.
done a lot of like sciencey kind of academic project management. And that does actually relate to my books, even though there's not much
Oh,
science or
yeah.
project management in my books. I think the being able to think like a project manager is something
Hmm.
that really helps you get writing done because,
Ooh.
something like creating a research clinic is not something you do boom in a day. It's something that you have to break down into small pieces and still be able to see how things fit into that bigger whole. And also the idea of like part of the job is just like putting your butt in the seat and doing something, like getting the ball moved a little bit further toward your goal. And as a writer, I think that mentality and that mindset has really helped me get where I need to be in finishing to deadline the series so far.
Mindy, I didn't know you are a project manager by trade. I have a lot of project management in my past, and I totally echo what you're saying that, those deadlines like, okay, I need to have the book halfway done by this date. It needs to be to my, editor by this date. I tell you, folks, project management is a godsend in the writing world. But enough about that. Let's talk about At Death's Door. There we go. Or actually, if we want to start, kind of tee us up a little bit, Mindy, if you don't mind. And like I said, people would rather look at the book cover than me, I'm sure. Tell us about this series. It features a fantastic main character, Delilah O'Leary. So before we actually get into this book, can you kind of tell us a little bit about Delilah and about, how she ended up where she did?
So, like many a cozy mystery heroine, she decides to go back to a small town where she has family ties. And that was kind of the genesis of this book. I originally pitched it as being set in the city of Chicago because we've got our delicious deep dish pizzas. We've got a detective who's the great grandson of Al Capone, so Calvin Capone, who's a
That
police
is so
detective.
cool.
And then Delilah, who shares a background similar to mine, that she grew up in the same kind of area where I grew up on the south side of Chicago. She worked in fine dining. I am a terrible cook, so we diverged there. But all of that was what I pitched, and I set it in Hyde Park, a neighborhood in Chicago. And the publisher came back and said, "Love everything about it. We need it set in a small town." And I was like, so you want a Chicago book with all of these Chicago elements, but not in Chicago? And they were like, exactly. So then we found Geneva Bay, which is a very lightly fictionized version of a real place, Lake Geneva in Wisconsin. My aunt and uncle live near there, and it still has very strong ties to the city of Chicago. So a huge part of their tourist revenue comes from Chicago tourists coming up for the weekends or who have second homes there. But it's this super unique place with a ton of very interesting history. So it's got mansions all around this stunning lake that are owned by some of the big names of Chicago industry. So the Wrigley Mansion is there, the Vicks Mansion was there. And to this day, that's still the case that a lot of rich Chicagoans have weekend places there. And some of those rich Chicagoans were mobsters because they were very rich, some of the richest people of their time. So people like Dillinger, Capone spent time up there. So that was kind of a seamless way to move this big city story to a small town and still keep all of those elements that I loved.
That is so amazing that, I think a lot of times when folks are reading maybe a cozy mystery for the first time, that they are like, oh, this town, with the small place, but it has these big mansions. It's got all of this like amazing history. Like places like that don't really exist. So like they're like, okay, well, like this is fiction. But like to know that there are places like that out in the world, and even though it might not be by name in the book, like to have that inspiration, take place, I think is just so cool, because that's the one thing that I love about cozy mystery towns is that they are so diverse in all of the offerings that they have, whether it's tourism, there's the kind of socioeconomic statuses that are all involved. It's just, I think that's so amazing that it's rooted in a real location, because there's so much cool stuff going on in Geneva Bay. And the fact, like for me, I was like, oh, like maybe Green Bay, Wisconsin, that this is modeled after. But no, like it's so I get to learn something new every day, which I absolutely love. So that's my little spiel.
And so kind of along that line, one of the things that I think is so cool, Mindy, the way these books have, I think, kind of almost to your point, that kind of Dirty Dancing type vibe. And what I mean by that is that, it's set in this kind of, resort where the big folks, either still are or, had been. And I just think you paint such a vibrant picture of the community that I totally fell in love with it. I want to go there because, Geneva Bay and, should only be about 4 hours from Indianapolis. So I ought to be able to find it, hopefully. And if I don't find it, I'll end up in Lake Michigan, and that'd be my problem. But anyway, so what I'd like to know, can you talk a little bit about Delilah's career? You got pizza on the cover. Why, maybe tell us a little bit why you chose Delilah to be a restaurateur, and then from there, then why focus on pizza?
I have a lot of regrets about having her own a restaurant. So let me begin there with my many
Okay.
regrets. It's,
Love it.
when you create a cozy mystery character, you want somebody who has an interesting profession, that people ideally want to learn about, And I knew that the publisher wanted this to be a culinary cozy. So I'm like, great, we're going to open a restaurant and it's going to be Chicago. And to me, like, what is more Chicago than deep dish pizza? But that has created so many challenges because running a restaurant is extremely difficult and time consuming. And I have to create space for her to sleuth. So you'll often see
Hmm.
me like these books will take place during, a down weekend or over a very compressed period of time or over one catering gig because I realized like, oh my gosh, she's probably working 15, 16-hour days, especially during the tourist season. She doesn't have time to solve this case. So I've really, set a problem for myself by putting this in a restaurant. But that's also created opportunities that I'm not a big cook, but I have absolutely loved the scenes where I get to describe the food. I love describing the way that th things smell and taste. And I think in a way it maybe helps me that I'm not somebody who cooks a lot because I have to really think about like, okay, how would I describe the taste of cilantro? It's grassy, it's earthy, it's whatever those words are. And it makes me almost look at it like I'm writing science fiction or something like, oh, as she steps on Mars, the surface of the planet. But it's kind of new to me in a way that maybe if you cook a lot, it's not so new. So I'm carefully observing, chefs on TV. I visited a friend's restaurant and, kind of saw the flow of the day and how they organize things in the back of the house. So as a writer, being able to be in that like observation and description mode has been really fun rather than writing about something that comes very naturally to me.
That is such
Well, and
a
I
like
think,
a smart point to like have
yeah.
as part of your writing experience because you can kind of illuminate for the audience like somebody who is completely new to this scene. And I want to circle back really quickly, Mindy, to your point about the this challenge that you kind of set for yourself with having your sleuth own a restaurant. That is exactly why in my books I have my characters, they're like their jobs are not dependent on like them actually doing work because otherwise it's like when are we going to get this mystery solved? And but those are things that like when you're maybe like brainstorming at the beginning of the creative process that new writers or folks that may not have or who are thinking about writing may not have thought about. So to kind of learn from your lesson of you've created this challenge, but then you've turned it into this amazing opportunity. It's such a positive thing to share, and I don't believe that you're a terrible cook because you came up with pretzel crust pizza, which I just am like, why isn't that like where is that a thing? Because I need to eat it. Like
I
that
do
just
make
sounds
all the
amazing.
recipes and I make them multiple times, so I
Oh,
know that they work. But there are recipes in the back of every book. They're written from the perspective of the characters who make that food in the books.
so cool.
Um, and they're things that I make multiple times, usually send out to friends and family for them to make because I want to be sure that this is something somebody could make at home and that it's actually going to be good.
Well, and I love it. I got such a kick out of reading the recipes because at first when I started reading the recipes, it's like, wait a minute, what's going on here? And then it kicked in. It's like, oh, so yeah, so folks, if you haven't read these books, the recipes are not just your traditional. You get to the end of the book and there's like, okay, to make this, it's this, and this. There's some additional storytelling, which I think is just so much more fun. So kind of like a little bonus bit there. But one of the things also that I want to pick up on is talking about the fact that it was a challenge with a restaurateur because they may not have the time to devote to investigating murders when they're busy. So here, this book opens in February. We're leading up to Valentine's Day, and I just thought it was a really clever way for you to create urgency, on Delilah's part when you bring up the fact that, hey, they're kind of struggling right now cash wise because it's not the busy season. So could you using that as a tip off, could you kind of set the scene for what for this particular book for At Death's Door? Like I said, we're leading up to Valentine's Day. So kind of take it from there, if you would.
Sure. So for this one, I had an idea way back when that I wanted it to be about ice fishing and catfishing. So catfishing is in romantic con scams, not as in like, hillbilly hand fishing. So those were the two things that somehow kind of popped in my head as things that would make sense. And that's partially from spending time in Lake Geneva, the real place that this is based on, in that area as a child and going out on the ice. And my dad used to ice fish and is still an avid fisherman. Actually, he just took my son last weekend. So that's something that I have like as a core memory of childhood is like being out on frozen lakes. Of course, now the Lake Geneva doesn't freeze over the way that it used to, so this is a little bit fictional. You have to kind of suspend disbelief a little bit, but that image of like ice fishing plus catfishing was where the foundation of the whole thing came together. And I knew with the catfishing angle that I wanted various romantic plot lines to be happening. So almost every character has some kind of romantic entanglement in this. And that was just something that I wanted to do for myself for fun, just to kind of move those character arcs along and create some new kinds of relationships between the characters. So those were the threads that were kind of dangling in my head, and I wove them together into this story, which is that there is an old treasure, and this is again based on a real thing. There was the largest train robbery in U.S. history happened 100 years ago in northern Illinois. So in the 1920s, which is very crazy that you think of train robberies as being like Old West and masked bandits on horses. But this was gangsters in cars, who committed this giant heist, and much of the loot was never found. So that story is kind of the underlying crime to this. Again, true story, still to this day, don't know a lot of what that loot, where that loot ended up. And the mob entanglement, weirdly, through all these strange connections between the various arms of the Chicago mob, led to the St. Valentine's Day massacre a few years after that train robbery. So having that spine of story and then being able to weave these other visual elements of, the cold and the ice and this romantic scam that may or may not be going on in the background was something that I wanted to play with. And then, voila, At Death's Door was born.
Oh my goodness. I just love hearing how your mind works. Like that is such a cool, like to have those two, like you have fish, but then you have catfishing, ice fishing, and then having it all come together. That is like like the creative process is so, so incredible. And one of the things that I just kind of where you mentioned about, the mob and this, how in both, Geneva Lake and then your fictionalized or Lake Geneva and then Geneva Bay, how there's the ties to Al Capone, but then your hero, your detective, is a descendant of Al Capone. So you have this like one side of the law, and then generations down you have Calvin, and I just found that that character building so interesting, especially like in a supporting character, because I imagine that Calvin probably has some hangups about his ties to Al Capone. And I'm curious, like, how did that idea come to you when you were first kind of mapping this out?
So initially, it was just a knee-jerk reaction because I grew up in Chicago and I would travel different places. And so, for example, I'm in this nowhere town in Peru during college and having the kind of conversation that you have when your Spanish is very terrible, like, hello, my name is Mindy. Where are you from? I am from here. And I said, I'm from Chicago. And the guy goes, bang, bang, Al Capone. And I was like, really? Like, that was 100 years ago, bro. And that's like what everybody, even in this little village in the middle of nowhere in Peru, knows about Chicago. So I decided, you know what? I'm just going to own that. We're just going to embrace
Mm-hmm.
that as part of the series. So that was where the Calvin Capone character came from. But once I decided that this is going to be a cop, then my mind immediately went where yours did, is like, wow, that would be kind of crazy. Like if you had this legacy, he chose to be a cop in part to undo this legacy that he's not happy with and not proud of. And in At Death's Door, we get to really see for the first time like what that's meant throughout his life and how different members of his family have played with that, confronted that.
Mm.
And that's a little bit because like in the cultural zeitgeist right now, there's been this weird like reformation of Al Capone that I still don't totally understand, where like suddenly he's idolized again as this
He's
paragon of like smart business sense. And he
yeah.
was, sure, he was one of the wealthiest people alive when he was living, but the way that he made his money was that he had a monopoly on alcohol and prostitution and illegal gambling and all of those things and brutally enforced that. So I wanted to look at all of that and kind of through the eyes of a lot of different characters, to kind of confront that legacy of like what does it mean to be proud of where you are from and proud of who you are and not proud of who you are and ashamed of where
Mhm.
you're from and just kind of see that play out in a bunch of different ways.
Yeah, and to your point, the farm or the fashionable bookworm just chimed in talking about how Capone's cousin Dominic is totally leaning into that thing. So, can you maybe talk a little bit about Dominic? And maybe there's got to be some conflict going on there between the two of them.
Yeah, so the Dominic character was really fun to write. Somebody asked me yesterday if I've ever like killed someone that I don't like in real life. And this is the kind of, opportunity that we have as murder mystery writers that character is, like a walking mansplanation. He's someone who just kind of is like very much like, this is how it is, little lady. And I think a lot of us have met that guy. He's that
Mm.
guy. Like he walks into the room a certain way and then he's going to act a certain way when he's there. So it was a lot of fun to write him as a foil to Capone. And, he's taken the entirely different track that he's trying to make money off of his Capone name and the legacy of his family, whereas Calvin Capone would rather do anything than acknowledge that that's who his family is. So that character was a joy to write, as all good baddies are.
And I think in regards to Calvin, like in revealing his character, like I think it shows the reader, where he is. He has become a cop because he wants to kind of right the wrongs of the past. That goes to show that like he's a good person, and I think often in in cozy mystery tropes, we sometimes have the scenario where the cops and our amateur sleuth are antagonistic with one another, or maybe there's something shady. You've got like a lazy cop or something along those lines. But with Calvin, like we know that he is purposely trying to both better himself, his family, and the community. So I think it's also like a revealing choice to show that showcases his character, and I just love it. I agree with you regarding like this resurgence of Al Capone as well. Um, I listen to a lot of true crime podcasts, and I can't tell you how many times his name comes up regarding like the fact that like he was only ever charged for like wire fraud, and like that's how the government took him down. But it's like okay, like what about all this other stuff? So he's such a fascinating character that I can see like what the draw is, but I'm glad that we have Calvin to kind of center us and remind us. It's like, hey, like yes, maybe the legend of him is larger than life, but he actually was like a pretty bad dude.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I love in a cozy mystery being able to add a little bit of thematic complication. In
Mhm.
addition to our whodunit plot, I like wrestling with some moral questions, in the background, and that's the one that we are kind of wrestling with throughout at Death's Door.
Mhm. We haven't talked
And
about
you know that
Butterball
that
either,
yeah,
really quickly.
yeah, no kidding. Which is
I'm
which is
looking
a
at the time.
crime. Yes, but unfortunately, Mindy, we're almost out of time, which is awful. Just real quick, I want to give a shout out to Auntie Biz. Can you talk to us a little bit about her? She is so cool.
So that is Delilah's cantankerous aunt, and the reason that she moves back to this area is because her aunt lives there and grew up there. I just realized I'm going to be like fully in the dark by the time this is over because the when I first came into this room, it was filled with glorious sunlight, and now the sun is
Mhm.
setting.
Yeah.
I'm going to like slowly disappear from the screen. But Auntie Biz, she's a lot of fun to write, very cantankerous, very stubborn. And she's kind of like if Delilah herself, who has many of those same type A perfectionist characteristics, if you just like boiled her for 80 years and got the distilled essence of her, without all of the softening things that go on in Delilah's life, like she's got these close friendships, she's got this relationship and things that kind of wear away some of those rough edges. I wanted to show, if she had chosen another life, what her life might have ended up like, which, Auntie Biz can be very kind and supportive of her former students, of Rabbit, who she tutored, a character who she tutored when he was imprisoned. And there, you see those softer elements of her, but they peek through like a pretty rough exterior.
That's a really cool, like, stylistic decision, though, to have kind of this future self of Delilah in like in her world, so she knows, like, okay, like if I stray from this line, like who knows what could happen to me. That's a very fun tactic that I've never really thought about before. Super cool.
Yeah, she's the ghost of Christmas yet to come.
Ooh. We have to ask this because, we've been talking about pizza, and I don't think we've talked nearly enough about pizza as much as I liked, but I would love to know, Mindy, what is your go-to pizza order?
So my favorite pizza is the pizza I grew up with, as many people, find that, and it's Aurelio's Pizza, which is a tavern style pizza. I don't discuss it much in the books, but it's another type of Chicago pizza that's more of a thin crust cut into squares. And
Oh, okay.
an Aurelio's Pizza cut into these little tiny squares. I can usually eat like 4 or 5 of them, and yeah, it's just like they just go down so
Ooh.
easy. So that with veggies, like all the veggies on top, is my absolute favorite.
Ooh,
Nice.
yummy.
Mm.
Yeah.
JC, what is your go-to pizza order?
In my younger days, it was give me all the meats possible. As I've gotten a little bit older, I've realized maybe that's not the best choice. So my wife and I, we're big fans of pepperoni and banana peppers. Getting a little bit of
Oh.
spice, a little bit of sweetness there. We're kind of more thin crust folks, but I'll be honest. I will never say no to any kind of pizza. So that's
Ooh.
me. How about you, sir?
I am pretty basic. I am a pepperoni pizza gal, although I do love a good cheese slice will like take me to another level as well. But there was a really good, it was like a bacon chicken pizza that I had from like some convenience store in the middle of nowhere, Maine, that was absolutely delicious because it had like a little bit of like ranch mixed in on the chicken and with the cheese and the bacon. It was, you know,
Nice.
added like 5,000 points to my cholesterol, but ooh, it was yummy. It was yummy. But I'm also like you, like I will take any type of crust, but I do lean towards more like the thin crust, but like a nice thick rim around the edge.
Yeah, definitely.
Mindy,
Yeah.
this has been absolutely delightful.
Yes.
I have learned so much about like character building from you, and that's like my favorite thing about this show is like I'm learn something new every time that we get to talk with someone. So thank you so much for sharing your time with us, for sharing your amazing characters with us, for sharing fabulous pizza with us. If folks
Yeah.
want to stay connected to you, what's the best way to keep in touch? Email or not email, website, newsletter, social media. Where's the best place to find you?
So mindyquigley.com is, that'll show you all of the ways to keep in touch with me, but I'm most active, I would say, on Instagram. So I like to post crazy little skits that I often do with my kids and props. So if you like a zany kind of Instagram presence, then I am at Minty Fresh Books on Instagram. But all of those things are cataloged in newsletter sign up on mindyquigley.com.
Fabulous. And
That is so
if you ever
cool.
want to have cheese thrown at you, you can go to Mindy's Instagram and see some fabulous cozy mystery authors getting it, and readers as well.
Oh, I'm
Having
going to pin
having
that today so that if anybody picks this podcast up in the next week or two, that they'll be able to
they
see
will
staring at
know what they are looking
bacon
for, because
cheese.
that was such a great malice moment that we had. We got a couple comments regarding pizza for folks. Mizan saying veggie pizza for me. Fashionable Bookworm says there's a local pizza place that offers chicken artichoke pizza. Ooh, they'll make you sell your loved one for one. That sounds like a pizza for me. I'm there. And really quickly, JC, I know that you have to depart to get back to the day job. Any quick recommendations for viewers on reading, listening, watching TV?
So other than, of course, at Desto, which is absolutely fabulous, folks. And Mindy, I want to thank you and your publisher for sending me this copy. It has been so much fun to read. I want to send a quick shout out. I've been watching The Night Manager. It's a 2016 limited series. Tom Hiddleston, Hugh Laurie. Gotta love the whole spy intrigue kind of thing. So that's been a lot of fun. Mindy, how about you? What are you enjoying these days?
I'm watching the new season of Nobody Wants This, the rom-com with Kristen Bell on Netflix, and absolutely loving it. And then I am reading Mockingbird Court, which is the sixth book in the Juno Black series, because I'm doing an event with her in a couple of weeks, or one half of the author team that makes up Juno Black. And it's woodland creatures who solve mysteries in a forest. So if you like the ultimate cozy, it's almost like those little critter families, as if they were unleashed into a murder mystery world.
Oh, wow. That sounds like super fun.
Mm-hmm. Sarah?
I don't know if I what rock I've been living under, but last week I mentioned how much I would love to be a ghostwriter for Dan Brown, and lo and behold, there's a new Robert Langdon book out. So I downloaded it today. I can't wait to get started on it. It's book 6. It's about secrets. I can't remember what it was, but I just lost my mind. I was oh my gosh, there's a new Robert Langdon book out. So that's going to be my life for the next couple of days. Mindy, again, thank you so much for being here. This was absolutely wonderful to catch up with you. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. Thank you to our wonderful viewers who joined us here live. We very much appreciate you. Again, wishing all of our veterans a very happy Veterans Day. Thank you for your service. We look forward to being back. I believe we have a show on November 25th. So we will return with more bookish fun for you. But until then, everybody, have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. And don't forget to stay bookish. Bye, everyone.
Bye.